coach, and I'm a certified health coach and personal trainer, and I serve women over 45 who are looking to get their energy back, their figures back, and take control of their health and live longer, healthier, more active lives.
Hi, my name is Ashley Miller. I have an independent financial services firm called Transformational Wealth. What I do is I help my clients modify their behavior to align themselves with their goals, whether it's short-term like debt management or long-term as in retirement.
I'm Holly Norian. I own
Absolutely. You ready to roll? Okay. Do you want... welcome, first of all. I'm Claire Ryman. I am the Client Opportunities Coordinator here at the Iowa Center for Economic Success and Iowa Women's Business Center. We offer a plethora of educational opportunities like you're participating in today. I left some flyers out front. First Fridays, we partner with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and Christina Moffett is here, and I think she has a couple events she'd like to introduce you to.
Hi everybody, welcome. The partnership is so excited to team on these. So my coworker Mike, you'll see in the back, we actually simulcast these out so women that cannot be here can watch in throughout the state, throughout the U.S. and see what's happening here in Des Moines. I am the Director of Small Business Resources. I also own a business on Ingersoll, so I live all the headaches that you all live and can relate very well to you with my team of 14. We do have a couple events coming up in the partnership. I left flyers out there once a month. Besides doing the First Fridays with the Women's Business Center, we do a class called Top 5 for Small Business, and it is a different topic every month. So last month we did disciplining and terminating employees. So headaches that you usually have. This month coming up is storing your data. So if you think about Dropbox and all the clouds that we use right now, small businesses are the #1 target for hackers because they know that their data is not usually secured. So we will go over that. And then the new tax law went into effect. So in March, we actually have an accountant coming in to talk about the new tax law and how that will affect your business. The other one that we have coming up, if you are seeking any type of financing for your business at all, we have a half-day seminar on how exactly to go about that. It will save you a lot of time. We walk through the different types of loans that are available by bank, also commercial loans, and grants available through the state, and what type of businesses are available to receive those grants. We get that question a lot. So we only have 20 seats for that just because of the way the room is set up. So if you're interested at all, please grab that and sign up. I already have 9 people signed up, so I only have 11 seats left for that class. So I will turn it over, let you guys roll. You will hear them repeat the question if questions are asked, just so our simulcast viewers can hear that. So I'll throw that out there, okay?
How many of you have never been to the Iowa Center or aren't familiar? Oh, okay, we have several. So the Iowa Center is a nonprofit organization that has several arms to help anyone start, grow, and sustain their business. So we have the Women's Business Center, which handles a lot of the education, the First Fridays, Topical Tuesdays, Dream Builder, Focus Me. So I encourage you to check out our website on that. Another arm is our microloan program, and that helps certainly start up and sustain your business. We are in the middle of tax season. We are the organizer of VITA for the state of Iowa, which is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. We provide year-round tax assistance for low to moderate income Iowans. All year round, we will do 20,000 tax returns in the state of Iowa in a year. So we also have the only women-only angel investing network called Fin Capital. So we have a nice spectrum of education, capital, tax assistance, and angel investing. So next First Friday, just so you know, with our partnership with Greater Des Moines Partnership, we will host one of these at the partnership once a quarter. So in March, it will be downtown at the partnership. And that's Whitney Warren of Ivory House Photography. All right. Housekeeping, these evaluation sheets are not scratch paper. You can, I actually need them completed, so please, and I look at them, and we implement, when you guys make suggestions, we do our best to make those happen. So thank you. So let's introduce Nicole Lorenson of Preservation, and then we will sit with our very formal interview. So I'm just going to have her start and tell us about her business. To just start, what is Preservation?
Okay, so Preservation is a vintage and modern lifestyle boutique and photo studio. I also have an online store that sort of like brings the two together. So it's sort of like 3 businesses in one, but I like to think of it as one business. The shop is a mix of vintage goods that I've either reclaimed or some things I find and I just think they're perfect and they go out that way. But there's also modern pieces that are made in a conscious, thoughtful, sustainable way. Some are made in the U.S., some are not. But I try to buy, at least the modern pieces, I try to buy pieces that are being made in a thoughtful, ethical way. So to me, it makes sense to mix that with vintage. You have these pieces that are really moderately priced, and then you have like something that's more of like a, treat yourself, like splurge type of thing. So that's sort of how I dress and makes sense to me. So that's kind of what the store is. Okay. And the studio is in a separate location, currently in a separate location, but it's just as much a part of the shop because I photograph all of the content for the website and social media, and also portrait as well. So that's kind of
a very interesting combination. So
yeah.
I think there's a story behind why you have both the photography and the vintage. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how this interest got started and kind of what your journey was.
Sure. So I studied photography at Hawkeye Community College in Waterloo, Iowa. They have a very specific focus program there. It's a 2-year program, 3 if you want to like major in multiple types of photography. It's still there. And I majored in commercial photography first, hoping to be a fashion photographer. That was like, my dream job. Moved to New York, take pictures of models. And so I did that, and it was great. And I decided through doing my commercial portfolio and sort of like learning a lot about that, I just sort of noticed that my pictures were really more focused on the person than the product. So I ended up staying an extra year and studying portrait photography as well, and just was naturally better at portrait photography, probably because I connect with people easily. So I think it was really beneficial to have both. During this time, like, when you're shooting your assignments and shooting your portfolio, I was still really into fashion. So I was like thrifting cool pieces to like use in my shoots because there weren't that many vintage stores then. And a lot of them were really protective of their inventory. Like there was a store that wouldn't even let me like borrow a piece for a shoot. So I just started thrifting out of like need for like stuff for shoots, and couldn't afford to like go to stores and buy stuff, so like modern stores. So that's kind of how I started collecting vintage, and then eventually I just really enjoyed it. It was really therapeutic to me, and which seems kind of ridiculous, like hanging out in like a smelly thrift store, but I eventually just like started buying things when I didn't need it, buying things that weren't my size or for a certain model, and I had like a closet full of vintage that was like, for someday. And about that time, Etsy became a thing, and I was pretty hesitant to sell online at first because I always thought like, I don't want to like, I don't know, this was like in 2009, so I was just like, I don't want to have a website, like, no, it's too much work, whatever. But eventually I decided, well, I guess maybe I should back up. I did move to New York after I graduated to be a commercial photographer, to be a fashion photographer, and it never really like was actualized. Like, I nannied, and that was my full-time job, and I had a couple connections in Brooklyn, and every time I would get a call for a job, it was like when I was in the middle of my other job, and it was never regular. And I think being a Midwestern, like hardworking like individual, I was just like, that is not comfortable for me. Like, I can't just, there's no way I could quit my nanny job and just hope that I would get calls for shoots. So I stayed there for a year, and it was an amazing experience, and I learned a lot, and I grew my vintage collection while I was there. And then I moved back, and I got a job at a portrait studio doing, you know, pretty traditional things you do when you work in a studio, retouching, photo assisting. I handled orders, booking, all that stuff. And in the meantime, still was collecting vintage the whole time. And then I worked at another portrait studio and kind of the same thing. And then fast forward to Etsy times. And then Etsy becomes a thing. And then I was like, I have all this vintage. I was about ready to move to Colorado. And I was like, gosh, I should maybe try and sell it. You know, it seems like a lot of people are selling vintage on Etsy. So I eventually decided to do it, and my photography skills obviously helped because it was really easy for me to like take the photo, get it online. And that's kind of how the two merged, because when I started selling on Etsy and taking photos of stuff all the time, my photos were very different than everybody else's photos on Etsy at the time. And it was pretty awesome. Like, I was selling stuff and I was kind of seeing what people liked and what people didn't like. And I still did photography, like freelance. I would shoot weddings and babies and families and like stuff like that mostly. And that's kind of what I did. And I kind of realized right away that like this is where I see like myself going. I love doing this. This is perfect. But I still kind of in the back of my head was like, I would like to have like a space, like a physical location. So then in 2012, I moved back to Iowa and I moved to Des Moines. And I did my first pop-up at Market Day, the Black Friday Market Day that year. Or I guess, it would have been 2012. And that was probably the first like physical sale where I sold vintage and outside of like Etsy. And after that I was like, I have to sell to people in person. Like seeing somebody like try the thing and like connect someone with, I'm super nostalgic. I'm super sentimental. Like I look at my baby album every time I go home. So when I see someone like find a piece of vintage that like hasn't fit anybody else's, I've had it forever, and then it like meets that person that it belongs to, it's just like, you know, yeah. That's cool. I love it. It's cool. So I knew after that Market Day that I was like, I have to have a shop. And I kind of I still wanted to be a photographer. I never wanted to give that up. I just didn't think I could have a studio and only do photography. So I just sort of kept cultivating that idea in my head, like how could these two things work together? And preservation, the name came about when the businesses were separate. I had Vintage Salvation, which was my Etsy store, and I had Harlow, which was my photography business, and they were legit businesses. And then preservation was the name I chose for my LLC that like encompassed both of those businesses. And I knew that if I had a store one day and I sort of combined the two, that's what I would call it. And it just made sense to me. And obviously photos are preserving memories and a time, and vintage clothing, I mean, is preserving clothing, I guess, and also memories in a time period. So that name, no one else had it, surprisingly, and so that's how that came about. And I worked at 87 Central. The whole time I lived in Des Moines, I worked at 87 Central full-time, which is a custom design and screen printing business, and I was their in-house photographer and like had a house and managed accounts and that sort of thing. And I met tons of people while I worked there and networked a lot, and got familiar with the East Village, and I just like fell in love with that area of Des Moines. And I kind of knew that that would probably be the only place that preservation would work. In Des Moines. So I would keep my eye out. I didn't really have a formal plan or anything, but I would keep my eye open. And I was looking at the building I'm in currently. I was looking at the space that's on the opposite side of the building, and it just wasn't working out. I wasn't connecting with them, and they thought it was going to be rented, and I don't know, it was just like back and forth. And then Chrissy, who owns Domestica, kind of gave me a heads up and was like, I think I'm going to leave the space. I'm going to go farther into the East Village. You know, you should give them a call. And so I did, and they got back to me right away, and they were like, yeah, like let's get some paperwork signed. And so from there I was like, okay, I need a business plan. Yeah, so like I kind of found the space first. I mean, I had already like knew I was working towards that, but I hadn't really created an official business plan. I hadn't gone after getting a loan yet or any of that. So I don't know, I'm talking so much.
That's the point.
So basically, once that space was available, I had to move pretty fast. I actually used a company, and forgive me because I don't remember what it's called, but I used a company that was out of Seattle, I think, that helped me write my business plan. So basically, we had several phone interviews, and I know there's like plenty of resources.
She didn't know about us at the time.
Well, the thing is, I did meet with someone at the Iowa State office downtown, but it was something that I was like, required a lot of writing, and like writing is not my strong suit, and I'm more of a verbal communicator. And so through a couple of phone interviews and like some basic questionnaires, they basically like and I sent them like imagery and stuff, they put this like really amazing business plan together for me. And I met with a banker at West Bank, Gabe, and it was great. Like, he was so helpful. And also in the meantime, I met with a lot of small business owners in the East Village. Chrissy from Domestic Hut, Tammy Stroh, who used to own Stitch, Mike Draper, and then my bosses at the time, Zach and Ben. A lot of people were really cool and like would meet me for coffee, and I'd just ask them a million questions. And a lot of things about the loan, really. Like, I was just like, how am I supposed to know this stuff? And they're like, you don't. You're not supposed to know it. You just kind of a guess. But it was helpful because they could at least say, like, well, you should at least expect this. You should always do this, kind of like some guidelines. So after that process started moving, I ended up getting a loan through the SBA, and it just everything kept working out. So I got the space, I leased the space, and from there, you know, here we are.
So the customers just flooded in, or did you maybe have to work at some marketing?
Yeah.
A bit.
I definitely had to work at some marketing. I think, you know, the East Village is sort of a destination in Des Moines, so people do come there to find new things, but I am sort of on the outskirts of the East Village, and a lot of people still don't even know that my shop is there. But yeah, marketing was a huge part. Obviously, like Facebook and Instagram, social media is the cheapest, easiest way to market yourself. And so that's where I started. And because I'm a photographer and I can create content relatively easily, that's what I did, and it seems to be working. I obviously have a website now too, and even when I opened, I had like a pretty basic website. It was like information-based, nothing really other than that. And then it grew slowly into a full-on like online store. But yeah, that's what I do primarily for marketing. I do have like a text marketing thing that I use now. It's called Mobility, and basically people can opt into it, and it's really kind of like, we call it friends with benefits, and you get text when we have special sales, when we have in-store events, and we have two kind of like, we have an out-of-towner one that they only get text when it's like an online thing, and then we have an in-town one that's like really anything that's happening at the store. And I've used that pretty much since I've opened, and I'm kind of on the fence about it right now. Like, I like it, I think it's cool, but I don't know if that many people care. I don't know. I don't know.
Have you thought about asking them?
Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, should I text them? Should I text them and be like, do you like
surveying
yeah.
kind of thing?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Well, I was just like, I either need to make a decision to get rid of this or not.
Maybe. So what are your tips on Instagram? Because clearly it's such a visual.
That's so broad. Like, what do you mean?
What do you find to be most effective? What does your audience want to see?
Okay, so I think that's important. That's an important
do they
thing
wanna see
is
it?
you have to know who your audience is and who's checking out your Instagram.
And how did you figure that out?
I think I figured that out based on who was responding to, you know, who's liking this thing, who's commenting on this thing. I mean, obviously Instagram has changed from when I first started till now because of the algorithms and how it all works. So that's sort of thrown a wrench in it a little bit. But I feel like the most important thing is to just be authentic to who you are and not try and, you don't want it to seem too scheduled. I mean, scheduling your Instagram post is a great idea. I don't do it because I should. I don't. I do it randomly, but I don't always know what I'm going to be doing in 2 weeks, you know? Like, I think I do, but then it'll change. And but I think just making sure that it's not like, you don't need to have, on Monday, have the same post every Monday. On Tuesday, have the same post every Tuesday. It just seems too, like, rigid. I think people can see through that. Mixing it up is good. I think one thing that I learned in the very beginning when I first opened, I was pretty hesitant to, like, be the face of my business. I had just gone through a divorce, you know, even though like I was feeling really good personally about opening this business and doing this thing that was a lifelong dream really. I still was like dealing with a lot of stuff internally and like sort of I don't know, like putting yourself out there when you have those like internal negative thoughts, you're like, not that I was like in a bad place. I mean, I was really happy about having the shop. But I think I was just like, I don't need to be the face of my business. That's not me. Like I have models for a reason, whatever. I think slowly over time, I've gotten feedback from people, and it's quite obvious when there's a post of me and there's way more likes of me wearing something from the shop than like someone else, which was kind of weird at first, but I guess it makes sense because it's my business, and it seems funny that I wouldn't know that, but I'm also a photographer too, so it's like I've never really liked to be in front of the camera. Like I'm like to be behind the camera, but I've had to get over that because I've found that that's what my followers want to see, at least sometimes, and so that's something I learned. And just letting it be a little more personal, I guess. I don't really like to share that much personal stuff on Instagram, but I think that's the thing too, like kind of keeping your business and your personal life separate a little bit. I mean, I think it's okay to share little things, but overall, like I think if it's too, there's a reason you can have a personal one and a business one. That's good. What else? Instagram is so different for everybody because if you sell cupcakes or you sell a service, it's so different. But I think having the content like look different, I don't know. I also think having it curated is really important. You don't want it to just look like this jumbled mess, which is why sometimes like planning pre-planning it out is helpful because you can kind of see it. There's apps where you can like grid it out and you can see what it looks like. I don't do that, but I can kind of like do it as
But would you suggest that you're a professional photographer?
Yeah.
But for the vast majority that
Yeah.
aren't, then...
I think that the way our phones are so good at this point. If you have a decent newer phone, it should take a perfectly fine photo for Instagram. I mean, I do post some photos on Instagram that are photos I took with my camera, like any of the shots that are from like the website, but you don't need to do that. I mean, I think that if you're doing a campaign, if you're a retail store and you're doing a campaign, that's different and you should hire a professional for sure. But if it's just like sort of everyday stuff, I think it's totally fine. If you have good light, your phone can take an amazing photo, and it's only being seen, this big. So I don't think it's like ideal. You don't have to have a professional photographer take every photo. Yeah. But I do think too with like the stories now, I think that you can curate your feed a little bit more and put things that are a little bit more random on your story, as opposed to trying to put everything on your feed. The story can be more informative and the feed can be kind of more like pretty and something that you want people to be able to go back and look at. If it's something you don't need them to go back and look at, then maybe it goes in the story.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about, maybe some hard lessons you've learned along the way.
Okay, there's a lot.
Things that you were like, oh.
Still learning. Let's see.
Or advice. Maybe you don't have to.
Gosh.
Take the hard lesson.
I mean, some of the hardest things, buying modern clothing was really hard for me. I'd never had any experience in buying and only vintage things, which is, I mean, it's similar. You're still like picking out what you like, and curating it for a season, but it's such a low investment that there's not so much pressure behind it. And so in the beginning, I think the first summer I was open, which is when I had the largest collection of modern in the store. Prior to that, it was like there wasn't enough time, the timing, the way that the fashion industry works. I just didn't have that many pieces. It was mostly vintage. And then after a season passed and I was able to like book some of those modern brands, I was really buying more for like what I thought people would like, or what I thought women in Des Moines would want, or trying to buy a little bit for everybody. And I realized like that summer, I was like, well, I probably wouldn't wear that. I wouldn't wear that. I wouldn't wear that. And then I was just like, duh. But I didn't know, I just was like, well, I think I had no idea who was going to be coming into my store in the beginning. And the vintage was already like my vibe. So I was like, I want this to be for the person who maybe wouldn't want vintage. But I learned pretty quickly after that first season that it was mostly important to just buy things that I would wear. Which also seems like a no-brainer, but it's not like I didn't like the things. It was just not necessarily my style. So that was a hard lesson. And in general, it's just stressful, and I think it's just a learning curve. I'll probably keep learning about buying for the next 5 years. So that was something, advice. A piece of advice that I would say is really important is if there's something you're not good at or you don't like doing, pay someone who is good at that to do it. Like, it's totally worth your time, your money, to like have your time to do something that you're good at or that you enjoy doing in your business. I pretty much hired an accountant right off the bat. I'm not bad with numbers. I did fine in math in school, but I don't enjoy doing it. So I hired the accountant right away just for like basic things, and then I noticed I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I mean, they were kind of like, well, we'll start here, and if you want us to do these things, we can do these things too. And within a couple months, I was just like, you just do everything. And I do pay them a lot of money to take care of my finances, and we meet a lot to discuss things that are going on and how things are going. But I don't really do any of that besides giving the accountant the things that she needs me to give her. And that's what works for me. I think because I am running an online store, running a physical store, and pretty much doing photography full time, I don't have time to do it. Like,
yeah, you pretty much have 3 businesses.
Yeah, I would have to hire a full-time employee so that I could, and then I wouldn't be at the shop ever. So it was just like, made sense. So that's something I would say, that's advice that someone gave me that I would also give. Don't waste your time on something you don't enjoy doing, because there's probably several things you enjoy doing in your business that would be better time spent.
Did you have a mentor? Or maybe more than one?
Yeah, I have several mentors in the photography realm of my in my life. My one of my instructors, who is my portrait instructor, is a mentor, and I still talk to him. I'm on the advisory board at Hawkeye, and I do like portfolio review every year, and keep in touch with him. He's actually retiring this year. And so he is a mentor of mine, and a couple other photographers have been mentors, but I don't really have like a woman business owner who's been in business for 20 plus years. I don't really have that yet, and that is a goal. I do want to have a mentor that is someone who understands my business and like what it's like to be in business. But I will say that the people who I trusted to talk to in the beginning when I was like thinking about opening my business, Tammy Stroh has been like super supportive. She owns Stitch with a friend of hers, and they don't have the store anymore, but she was a huge help, and she was really, we still keep in touch, and she's a great customer, and I love her. I would say if I really wanted to enlist her to be my mentor, she would probably do it. Yeah, any of those people. Mike Draper was definitely like super transparent about everything. He was just like, these are my numbers, this is what I did when I first opened, you should expect to do at least this much in sales. Like, he was just like laid it out on the table, and I really appreciated that. I mean, his business is very different than mine, but he's definitely like was an open book. Like, any question was not off limits, and I appreciated that. And I've done the same. Like, I've paid it forward. When the ladies at Kin opened, I basically gave them my business plan. It was like, you can look at it, whatever. I mean, it's totally different, and I'll probably continue if anybody new comes into the village. I think the more small businesses in the East Village, the better. So I think it's important to always support other small businesses. I mean, everybody. I think it can sort of seem like everybody's in competition, but they're not. There's enough to go around, and I think, you don't have to be like best friends with everybody, but I think it's important to support each other within a neighborhood, and that's the only way it works, Yeah.
Talk about employees. When did you hire your first employee? What was that like? How's that journey been?
My first official employee I hired probably a little bit over a year ago. I had friends help me out at first, like on weekends. The first year I opened, I had like 4 weddings within 2 months, which is not common, but it just happened to fall that way. They were pre-booked before the shop was even open, so I needed someone to kind of be there on Saturdays. It's an important day. And so my friends would help me in the beginning, and that was fine. Just like pay them cash or pay them in trade or whatever. But I realized pretty quickly that wasn't, a sustainable situation. So I had interns, and that was really great. A lot of girls at Iowa State, and some guys, like, want internships, and I think it's nice to pay your interns something. Some of them have to do it for credit, so you don't have to pay them, but usually they're pretty ambitious and want to learn, and at least the interns I have had have been in the field. They've been studying fashion, and they just want to know stuff, So that was kind of where I started. And the first year I had 2 interns, and I wasn't there a lot when they were there. I would have them watch the store where I went and did stuff. And that was fine. It was helpful that they were there, but I sort of realized after that period was over, they weren't able to help me as much because I wasn't there to teach them as much. And then the next year when I hired interns, I usually hire 2 every spring because I don't want really any intern to work full time because I pay them in trade, so I don't really feel like it's fair that they're working. They usually have another job that they have to work, so I usually have 2, and I was there more, especially in the first month that I had them, and I noticed that they learned a lot more, they learned faster, and it was really great. And so one of the interns I ended up hiring on as my employee, Gladys, who is still at the shop, and she's really great. She's just graduated from Iowa State with her fashion degree in merchandising and apparel design. And then also one of my good friends, Tori, who models for me on a pretty regular basis, she's kind of been a muse and a part of preservation since Etsy days. She's modeled for me and just been a sounding board, and she's young and always, I definitely don't go into a black hole on Pinterest. I don't go website search. I just don't have time to do that. And she's always this new thing. I kind of know some things, but she's goes deep into Pinterest and is always telling me cool stuff. It's nice to have someone that's a little bit, so she's always been a part of the shop in some way or another, and her being in the shop is varied, whether she's a shop girl, but she's also an employee too, but she's not in the shop as much. Gladys is my girl. So I don't know, I think when some businesses need employees right away, I would love to be at the shop all the time if I could be. I'm kind of a control freak, and I also when I have customers come in then I miss them and I'm oh man, I don't like not being there, but unfortunately sometimes I have to do a photo shoot. Right. And I think a lot of people do think that the photography part of my business is a side thing and it's not really a big deal, but it's a really integral part of my business. It's a huge source of income for me, and it is what I studied. It's my trade. So it's important to me to still do that. So it does take me away from the shop, which I don't like, and balancing that can be tricky because it's this one thing over here that, probably makes more money than selling clothing. But I really love this other thing too. So it is a balance, and having someone at the shop that I trust that is a hard worker is important to me. I think, yeah.
Talk about your time. I think we hear that this is a struggle. How do you balance your day? How do you run your day as opposed to your day running you?
I think the biggest thing that I've changed that is working a little bit better for managing my time is having certain days that are designated for doing certain things and trying to stick to that. Mondays are kind of my bills and getting in touch with people. Responding to emails or contacts that it isn't anything urgent, Monday's kind of my office day. And I say having specific days, for me, having specific days to do things. I'm still not amazing at managing time. I'm not bad at managing time, I'm just not good at not working. I would work, last night I went to bed at 1 o'clock. If I'm doing something I like doing, which I like doing most of the things, but I do know that that's not good, and I do get burned out, and then I feel my brain is fried, and then I need 3 days to recoup as opposed to just not working until 1 every day. But I've gotten better at that, cutting it off, But that's the thing about social media, or there's always that connection. Or not having your phone by you if you're doing a task, not having your phone by you all the time, because it's really easy to constantly be responding and checking it. I think that can be a time suck for sure. Email too, I'm the type of person that will check my email every 10 minutes and respond to someone right away, but I think it would probably be more efficient if I just checked my email in the morning, checked it at noon, and checked it at the end of the day, or even once a day. Yeah. But now I feel the people who I communicate with are used to the way I email. You get used to people's email styles, someone only checks their email in the morning and they won't email you back after that, then you just know you have to
wait.
Yeah, so that's little things like that. I don't know. Writing things down, putting them in a calendar. I used to be able to like make even a social obligation date with someone a week in advance and remember it. And now that's just not a thing. My brain is so full. It's like even if I put it in the calendar sometimes, if I don't put an alarm on it, like I don't know. I really probably should have a physical date book and write it down, but that's not, I always buy one and I like write in it for like a week and then it just, that's usually what happens. But I use Google Calendar, pretty much rules my life. If I lost my phone or something, I'd be in trouble.
Tell us what you think the biggest characteristic of a successful entrepreneur is. And I think we'd all agree you have it.
Yeah, I would just say being passionate about what you're doing. Yeah, I really love my job, which is probably why I work so much. I don't feel like I'm working all the time. Yeah.
And how do you stay motivated though? Because there's got to be days where you're like, okay, I don't want to do that today or this photo shoot or.
Yeah, usually not too often, but at least once a quarter probably I have a day or a week where I'm just like, usually it's financially related, because finances are always the thing that stresses me out the most and probably most people. But I think I think about my life before I owned my business and what I was doing. And I was never like terribly unhappy, but I wasn't fulfilled at all. And I think about all the positive things about owning my own business. And then I remember like, oh yeah, this is actually amazing. Like, I usually can just think about what my life was like before, because I think my work ethic and how I work for myself now is how I worked for employees, and which is great, but I mean, if you're going to work that hard, you might as well work for yourself. And I always worked for small businesses. That wasn't something I did on purpose, but I kind of realized that about the time I was opening the shop, I was like, wow, like I've actually only worked for small businesses my whole life. And that was something kind of cool that I like realized. So I learned a lot through all of that too, but
yeah, were there some lessons you learned from other employers, maybe on things that you are trying to implement in your own, whether how not to do it?
Totally.
Or how to do it?
I worked for two different photographers within a time span of 5 years. And the first photographer I worked for was really successful at the time. I mean, he was probably owning like a small photography studio, bringing in like almost $500,000, like crazy. And he had a really great team, but he wasn't that good at communicating with the team, and he was gone a lot. About the time I came in, he just wasn't really present, he wasn't there, and things just sort of, I don't know, it wasn't a great experience. And I ended up leaving because I just didn't like it, and I got a job at a different studio. And so that's something in hindsight I can see now. Like if you sort of check out of the business and you're not there, I mean, some businesses I feel like don't need quite as much of a personal touch. I mean, I think you could have like a salesperson that does the thing, but I don't know. I feel like most small businesses, you still have to be a part of it. And I don't know I think that first studio is maybe not in business anymore. I'm not really sure. Probably for several reasons. And then the second studio I worked at was female owned, and I definitely prefer working for women, just because I feel like it's easier to communicate most of the time. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I like working for like-minded, strong women. It's inspiring, and it's something that motivates me as well. But she was amazing. She was a photographer as well, but she was really good at marketing, really good at like managing her employees. She had all these systems in place. It was so organized, whereas the place I came from was not like that. And so I learned a lot of positive things from her just about running a business and not just being a photographer. I probably learned more about business than photography from her, and that was a really positive experience. I worked for her for 3 years until I moved to Colorado. But yeah, and working at 87 Central was really a really fun and interesting experience, like such a laid back atmosphere, like I wouldn't want my employees to have quite that much freedom, but it was nice when I worked there. I mean, you can kind of like choose your hours. My hours were probably the most set because I was like the front of house person, so I had to be available. But it was really laid back, and I think it was good and bad, but I also think that there were things, that business was growing pretty fast. And I think they're still growing, and I think Zach and Ben are great people, and I can relate to them because it's like you get so attached to every part of the business. I think your employees, the processes, I think I learned that from them, where I learned that like it's okay to like separate some of it and not get too sentimentally attached to an employee or a thing, or I think they really did love every employee like they were like their brother, you know, a family member, and I think that's really good. You should care about your employees a lot, but I do think when you're growing, when your business is growing and you get to a certain point where you have 15, 20 employees, the dynamic has to change a little bit. Yeah. But it was a really great experience. I met a lot of people there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why don't we do a little Q&A? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
You talked about your parents with me, how important they were.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'm really...
Give them a little shout out.
Yeah, my parents. I always give them shout outs. I grew up on a farm. My parents got divorced when I was really young, and my mom remarried a farmer in north central Iowa, like outside of Forest City area. And so I'm definitely really proud and always like draw a lot of inspiration from that sort of like rural upbringing. Not, you know, you have to kind of create your own everything there. I mean, you know, with all your friends that lived in town were like going to the pool, and you're just like stuck on the farm. But my parents are both really hard workers. My mom's a lab tech and has worked full time my whole life, even when she was a single mom of 3 kids. And my stepdad is a farmer and is also a really hard worker, and we had to work really hard as kids, you know, and I'm sure they did it for a reason, you know. Lots of really hard work, and I think now like I'm still a really hard worker, but when it comes to like manual labor, I'm like, nope. I did enough of that. I did enough of that when I was a kid. I don't want to do, like walking beans and detasseling and mowing, and like we had pigs, like we had hogs for a while, and like that was a whole thing. And I think people are always really surprised to find out. I also like went to a really small school, graduated with like 26 people, played like every sport, was in every activity. Just because that's what you do when you grow up in a small town. You just do everything because it's boring. And I love going back there because it's like a time capsule in the worst and best ways. You know, you go back and nothing's changed, which is amazing, but also you're like, wow, nothing's changed. But I do love going back. It's like super slowed down. You just hang out. It's good. It's a good getaway sometimes just to go to the farm and hang out. So yeah, my parents are really great and are super supportive and are amazing. My mom still like buys things for me online sometimes. It's so funny. She'll like write me notes she'll be like, now just make sure you ship this to me. Like, I think
you wouldn't.
Like I wouldn't. I think she thinks I think she's coming and she'll pick it up, but it's funny. I'm like, Mom, like I do this all the time. But it's just cute. She's awesome. Yeah.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine that the family support has been important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. My family's really important to me. I have a older sister and a younger brother too. And my brother is kind of self-employed. He's an orthopedic specialist, and he is like self-contracted, so he knows a lot about the business end of things and is currently getting his master's in business management. So he's been really giving me lots of good advice. Like talking to employees and like doing check-ins with them and like how to talk to your employees. He told me something really cool recently that it was like, you know, if there is a problem or you're doing like sort of an evaluation, like asking them as many questions and not talking as much and just like letting them sort of like come to the conclusion themselves. Like if, you know, someone's not coming to work on time, to ask them like, why are you not coming to work on time? What do you think would help you get to work on time? Instead of sort of just right off the bat suggesting how they could get to work on time, like letting them sort of come to the conclusion. He's had some good advice with that sort of stuff. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Okay, I have a couple questions. I'll tell you both of them, so then you can answer.
Okay.
One was just a personal one, like if you could tell us something about one of your favorite vintage finds. And then the second piece was around the Instagram and your posting. When you do those, do you notice a different drive in your web sales versus in-person drive to your store surrounding those posts?
And we need to repeat the question.
Okay.
So a fun personal find.
Yep.
And you repeat her question.
And the other question was, do certain posts drive sales differently on the website as opposed to in store? I have so many favorite vintage finds. I have this one pair of knee-high red leather boots that are like super, I don't know, they're probably like goat leather or something. I found them when I lived in New York, and they're so 80s, like pointy toe, flat. Like they come up kind of a point here and you can roll them down or whatever. I still have not been able to get rid of those, even though I haven't worn them in years. I wore them a lot when I was younger. Those were like a big find. And then recently I found a vintage t-shirt, an Elvis t-shirt that was like 25 cents at a garage sale. And that was insane, because I mean, I could probably sell that shirt for like $100, no problem, but it's cool. There's little things like in really old t-shirts, like the stitching on the sleeve was like sometimes a contrast stitch, or it was different, it wasn't like serged, you know? So you can kind of tell those things. So it was a really old shirt, and it has Elvis on it, and it's black, which everybody loves black t-shirts, so that was a good find.
So you're keeping that?
Yeah, I gotta keep that. I don't. What?
Another t-shirt that you slept in.
Oh yeah, a lot of my old t-shirts are my dad's, because he is also a hoarder. Like, I'm like low-key, like borderline kind of a hoarder, also a business owner. Like some days if you were in my car, you'd be like, what? Just like piles of stuff. Yeah, my dad saved everything, so a lot of my old t-shirts are my dad's, and I could never sell those. Because one of them is literally, like, he was in karate, and he had his black belt, and he had a shirt made of himself doing karate moves. 3 kicks, and it's like legit like photos of him, and then it says his name, Bryce Harmon, on it. It's just so hilarious. And he has a perm. It's so funny. It's really funny. So that was my favorite too. But social media question, for sure. I would say in general, the stories seem to draw more local traffic. Everything on Instagram sort of affects a website at this point, I think, but I do think sometimes I'm noticing that like local customers see the stories more than they see my posts. So I've noticed that for sure, but they still see my posts too. I would say, and then posting actually in the feed, if it's a picture of myself in something, that will affect in-store sales / what someone wants or what they think is cool more than if I posted like it on a model, or sometimes if there's, you know, I'll repost things too that the brands that I carry have, or something that's like an inspirational post. I think people tend to like those, but whether they drive sales, I don't really know. Me wearing it is probably an in-store, like, drives sales that way. And then online, gosh, a lot of anything that I post, it kind of is more like time related, like later evenings around 9, if I post something in a story, or I post something like, this is an actual product, it is for sale. Even though almost everything is for sale, I think if it's not really blatant, it almost always sells, like every time. And now at this point, like a lot of my online customers like check my Instagram and they know so I think everything kind of affects the online store, but I think it's timing more or less now, like with the story. If I post it, I mean, you can see it all the time, but if someone sees the story way later, they may just already assume that like that's gone or whatever. But I have noticed lately when I post in the evenings, whether it's a physical, like a post in my feed, or if it's on the story, the online traffic goes up. People go to the website, so, and most of the time that ends in a sale. Sometimes it doesn't, but.
Do you participate in the First Fridays in the East Village?
Okay.
Every one of them?
Yeah. So the question was, do I participate in East Village First Fridays? I usually do. I try to participate in as many as I can. Sometimes, like towards the end of the year when you're getting really close to like Promenade or whatever, I maybe wouldn't do the first Friday right before Promenade because usually nobody comes out. But I would say, yeah, I mean, even if it's just staying open those extra hours and having a little, even if you don't have anything, if you just stay open later and you're just available, I do that sometimes. Sometimes I'll have snacks and a drink, and then sometimes we'll do a whole thing like a pop-up, or we'll have something going on. So I've kind of varied it, and the traffic depends, you know, you never know. what you're gonna get. And it's very weather dependent in the East Village because, you know, walking is so.
Do you do all your own social media posting?
So the question was, do I do all my social media posting? At this point, I do probably 99% of it. Both of my employees know how to post and can post, and when I'm not in the shop, they're in charge of the story. Unless I'm doing something, like this weekend I'm going on a trip to thrift, so I'll probably story that while I'm out of the shop too, but usually if they're in the shop, they know it's their responsibility to post a story about what's going on. But in my feed, actually, I usually post mostly myself. And recently, Tori, who Shop Girl model, she took over content management for the blog. So she will post my, anything that's like a post related to the blog, she'll post that. So it's kind of a little divided, but I haven't been able to give up control of that yet. I still like doing it, and I feel like I'm still figuring it out, and yeah.
Think about growth. I mean, do you have a strategy for, you know, it might be premature, I don't know, but I'm here now, here's where I'd like to go.
Yeah. So the question was, do I think about growth and do I have a strategy? I do, for sure. I mean, I am only like 2.5 years old, so even today I feel a little bit like, I mean, I don't know how much I can teach you guys because I've only owned a business for 2.5 years, or a physical location business. But the website has already been like probably my main focus as far as growth goes. The first year I opened, I didn't have online. Well, I guess technically not first year, but the first 6 months I was open, I didn't have products online. And then last year we started full on, like everything online, and then we started marketing it as well, and we've sort of stair-stepped like our marketing efforts online, and I've seen like a steady growth there. So I'm really focused right now on how can I continue to grow that but still like sustain the same like customer service and online shopping experience. So that's kind of my main like short-term goal, is just like continue to grow the online sales, because even though like I do feel really supported in Des Moines and I have a lot of customers that love preservation, there's not, I mean, Des Moines is still a small city, so if the weather's bad, then nobody shops in the East Village, you know. So it's definitely good to have the online store for me, but I would love to, one of my main goals for maybe like 5 years out, maybe 10, I don't know, is to have a bigger location where my studio and my shop like live together. And that was the original goal. I wanted to have that together, but it was very quickly after I opened that I was like, this is not going to work. I would set up in the lobby. I'm in the Northwest building. It's on Walnut, and it's huge and it's beautiful. The lobby is like this huge marble space, and it's a shared space. We can all use it in the building, but I would be setting up for shoots before and after, and I'd always have to tear down right away and like store it in the basement. And so it was like a time suck. I mean, I was spending probably 40 minutes to an hour doing that. And then I would shoot in the window light sometimes, but I would have to move stuff out of the way and then move it back. And so when the studio space opened up, I was like, okay, I have to do that for now. I have to have this separate space where my stuff can just live. But I would love to be able to do shoots and even shoot for the website while my customers are in the store. Like, I would love for them to be able to see that. And that was really, and like I offer this thing, mini sessions, where when you invest in a vintage piece over $100, you get a free mini session where you bring the piece back and I style you and we do like a quick 15-minute shoot, and then I share the photos with you. And I would say maybe 25% of the people that get that use it. But it's fun. It's a fun way for me to document, because usually the vintage pieces that are over $100 are really special pieces, or they're vintage jeans, which we sell a lot of denim. So in a way that's like remarketing for me. And also like it's a way for me to document like the really cool pieces that maybe I didn't want to sell, but I sold them anyways. And it's like, yeah, it's cool to see it, and then I let them share it, I share it. But I think that I would probably do a lot more of those if I could just have the studio and we could do it like right there.
Right there.
Yeah. So that was what I wanted to do originally. And I have a really cool old 4x5 camera that I actually shot my first portfolio completely filmed like on 4x5 negatives. And I would love to like have that in the shop eventually someday and shoot like 4x5 Polaroids of people. But I need more space for that. So that's probably like a 5 to 10 year goal, having more experience happen in the store and just more space and having area to sit and But right now, I love my space right now. It's really great, and I don't want to like rush, because I've seen people rush out of like small spaces, and then, you know, everybody's always like, you can't ever move out of this space. It's so perfect, which it really is, but it is tiny. Space gets taken up really quickly, but yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What time do you wake up in the morning?
You know what? It depends on what time my dogs wake me up, but usually 7 o'clock is what time I wake up. I'm not a morning person by like nature. I've had to become a morning person. I'm usually a night owl. I feel like I find my stride working like later, but I've had to kind of shift a little bit, and I don't usually stay up till 1. Last night I tried to go to bed by 11 or so, but yeah, 7 usually. Yeah. What time do you wake up in the morning?
10:30.
Good for you. That's my ideal time. If I could wake up at 10:30, I feel like I would just be so happy. Yeah.
I am pretty happy, but I need to wake up early.
I just look perpetually tired all the time. Yeah.
Well, tell everybody, again, your store, where you're located, and your hours.
Okay, so my store is Preservation. It is in the East Village on East 4th and Walnut. And my hours currently are Monday through Saturday, 5 to 11. And those are like my short and winter hours. But usually, starting in March and then through holiday, I'm open.
11 to 5.
11 to 5, what did I say?
5 to 11.
I'm open at 5 a.m.
You know, we
Nobody's
were kinda
there.
like,
Oh my gosh, sorry.
Maybe.
Yes, 11 to 5, sorry. And then usually I am open every day. March, I really this year was like, I shouldn't switch my hours. But then, you know, the first quarter came and I was like, I'm switching my hours. It's just so slow in the East Village at this time of year, and even if our online sales are still, we can still maintain everything being there 6 hours, and it gives me a little bit of extra time to get things done, buy things for the, you know, for the next seasons. But yeah, going into March, we'll be open Monday through Sunday, and probably like 10 to 6, which is what our hours were before winter. So,
Great.
but they're all, our hours are on the website and on our Instagram and all the things. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and we will see you hopefully back here for some event or down at the Greater Des Moines Partnership for First Friday in March. And we can collect the evaluation sheets as you walk out, or you can give them to me now. Thank you.
How are you? Good.
Okay.
Hey, she did great.